Hi, thank you for joining us at IT Nation Connect for this presentation on driving security margins with operations. My name is Rex Frank, founder and CEO of C-Level Operations. I started in this industry in 1988 as a tech. In the early 90s, got promoted into that service manager role. And then in 2004 was an inaugural member of the Service Executives Peer Group that was run by TPG, the True Profits Group. And in that peer group, I learned a lot about how to stop being the technician and start being the manager, but more importantly, how to start being the service executive by managing to very specific financial metrics and being held accountable by my peers in my peer group to setting strategic goals and achieving them, as well as a ton of best practice sharing. And it really kind of set me up for a career as an IT managed service provider, service exec. Um, Specifically 25 years of experience in the managed services practice. I started way back when we were doing Novell servers with 2400 baud modems, if that gives you any idea. A couple of quick notes before we dive into the presentation. This was recorded a couple of weeks ago. I'm aiming for about 45 minutes of presentation with 10 to 15 minutes of live Q&A at the end. I'll share my personal Zoom meeting link at the end, so be ready for that. You might also want to have your phones ready to capture a couple of QR codes that might come up along the way for interesting things you can download and to join the Q&A at the end. I'll be live during this presentation on the chat, so feel free to jump in and ask any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them in the chat, and we may pick up some of them during the live Q&A at the end. And it's my understanding that these recordings will be available on the IT Nation Connect site for about 90 days. So what is service gross margin, right? That's the main thing we're here to talk about today. And there's a couple of quick formulas that we need to understand. Gross margin dollars is all of our service revenue minus our labor costs and our hard costs, right? And that'll give us our gross margin dollars. And then a gross margin percent would be those gross margin dollars divided back by the revenue times 100. And so we're going to dive into that as we get onto this slide here. So one of the things that I learned as a service executive is my job is to produce the gross margin for the company. And when we look at gross margin, we have this concept of what's above the line and what's below the line. So above the line is the gross margin. Below the line is all of our SG&A, or selling, general, and administrative expenses that it costs to keep the company up and running for, throughout the month. So I've got $1 of service revenue coming in at the top here, right? We got $1 coming in at the top. And how are we going to filter that money out through our costs and expenses to produce a net profit? And if you look at this graph, the biggest number on the page is our direct labor cost of goods sold at about 33%, or 33 cents of every dollar that comes in, we're going to spend on service labor. I've got about 2% or 2 cents going back toward our hard costs, right? Our hard costs are our RMM tools, such as ConnectWise Automate or Avic, or any of the other tools we use to help manage our systems. And that should produce a gross margin of about 65%. Now, on this 33% number, I'm just talking in this slide about raw salary. I'm not talking about loaded with taxes and benefits. If you were to include all of the costs of having those employees, that gross margin number would probably be more like 53%, something along those lines is what we would be aiming for. Again, the service executive should be producing that 65% gross margin, or it's 53% if you want to load it in taxes with benefits. But below the line is things like your sales and marketing, which should be about 7%. The management and administrative overhead should be about 7%. There's lots of other expenses. I'm not going to try to list all of them out. But one of the key things down there at the bottom is that 2% that I generally recommend setting aside as an investment, leaving somewhere around a 20-ish% net profit. And the interesting thing about this is, one of the things I learned in my career is very similar to when you are investing in your retirement plan, right? You guys probably have 401ks. you have some percentage, and the general advice is take 10% of your check and put it aside for your retirement and pay yourself first. And then you learn to live within whatever's left over. And one of the things I learned in the True Profit Service Exec peer group, and they teach in the ConnectWise Evolve Service Exec peer groups, is to pay your profit first. You have to make that 65 or 53%, whatever you want to use, gross margin not negotiable. As an owner, you want to make that 20% net profit not negotiable. You pay that first, and then you learn to live within whatever's left over. So what I'm advocating is that you decide what your financial model is, document it, and then hold yourself accountable to it and make it happen. It's not a surprise that you unwrap at the end of the month to see what your margin was or what your net profit was. It needs to be something that you make conscious decisions to make happen. So there's a couple of KPIs, right? Again, not loaded with taxes and benefits. We're looking for a labor loaded gross margin of about 65%. Remember, every engineer has 8 hours of time in the day to generate revenue, right? They need to convert their time into revenue. And the better they are at converting their time into revenue, the better your margins are going to be. And that's why, in my opinion, we need to make sure that all engineers have an understanding that that's what they're there to do, is to produce a profit for the company. And they need to convert their time into revenue at a rate of 3 times their pay. If I pay an engineer $5,000 a month, right, that's a $60K a year rate. They need to produce 3 times that 5,000. They need to produce revenue at a rate of 15,000 a month. And so let's take a look at what I call the 4 levers of service gross margin, right? So if you're a manager responsible for running a service department and your main role is to produce gross margin for the company, we've got these 4 levers that you can manage. And the first lever is what we call the engineer pay, right? So there's always a question, well, how much should I pay an engineer? And there's a chart here. And down at the bottom, you can see that I have combined all services at 33%. Well, not all services are going to have the same margin. So at the top of the chart, we've got technical services and staff augmentation revenue, which you're actually doing a very good job if you can make a 50% gross margin, AKA engineers can bill 2 times their pay. And this is because this is the most expensive way to service our clients. It's fraught with inefficiencies. There's a ton of non-billable drive time running back and forth trying to get parts and sending maybe under or overqualified resources to do the wrong kind of work. So when we change into the professional services model, which is our scope project work, we can have better efficiencies. You can generally expect your engineers to be billing, in tech services, they should be billing, maybe because of all the inefficiencies, they're billing 4 out of their 8 hours every day. But in professional services, because we're usually not scheduling engineers to go on site until after the product has been ordered and arrived, and generally those engineers are billing more like 8 hours out of their 8-hour day, right? Their utilization is better when they're doing professional services. We're actually looking for more like a 2.5 multiple. The engineers should be billing 2.5 times their pay, which would put us at a 40% labor cost. But when we're doing managed services, right, we're leveraging tools and technology and standardization, and we're trying to leverage lowest cost resources to do predictable, repeatable tasks. We should be able to achieve more like a 4.0 multiple. Engineers should be able to bill 4 times their pay, which should give us a 25% labor cost, right? So a tech services engineer, for paying them 5,000 a month, they're doing great if they can bill 10. A professional services engineer paying 5,000 a month, they're doing great if they can bill 12,500. But if I'm looking at a managed services engineer that's really leveraging tools and technology and standardization, I'm looking for that same $5,000 a month engineer to be billing more like $20,000 a month. And that's going to have a profound impact on your margins. So that's what you're willing to pay. You're willing to pay an engineer about a third of what they're able to convert their time into revenue. So the second lever, right? Lever one is engineer pay. The second lever is how much are we billing our clients? And one of the things we have to be careful when we're looking at billing rates is that this needs to be tiered by the skill level, right? A $60,000 engineer making $5,000 a month might need to bill something like $115 an hour. But if I have a $100,000 a year engineer, for them to convert uh, their pay, their revenue at 3 times their pay, they need to bill more like 190 an hour. And we'll look at a chart that talks about that here in a few minutes. And what are some of the impacts if you don't have, or if you do have a tiered rate structure? Well, there's going to be some issues you have to deal with where some clients are going to say, oh, I don't want to pay your rates for your highest engineer. Just send me your lower cost engineer. Even if it takes a little bit longer, I'm okay with that. But other clients are going to be the exact opposite. They're going to say, man, there's just so much inefficiency when you don't send me your best. I only want to pay for your best. So you'll be sending those. And it kind of plays a little bit of havoc with the calendar. But in my opinion, it's something that's worth working through. And don't forget your modifiers, right? If you have an engineer working after hours, you're probably paying them time and a half. That means you need to be billing at time and a half. Same things with some of your emergencies and after hour rates. And there is some room here to, if you're doing things that you're familiar with, right? Like another Office 365 migration, you may find that accepting some risk and going to a flat fee model on that project might help your labor rates end up effectively being a little bit higher. And we'll talk about that more in a few minutes. So first lever, engineer pay. Second lever is your billing rates. What are you charging your clients? And the third lever is utilization. So if we look at this chart, there's 13 sick and vacation days a year, which works out to about 104 hours a year that we know that they're going to be 0% billable. And six paid holidays a year, at least in the US, it's the big 6. That's 48 hours a year that we know they're going to be 0% billable, and 2 training days, right? And that number is actually, we'll come back to that number, the 104, 48, and 16. That's 152 hours a year that we know our engineers are going to be 0% billable. But we've also got 2 1-hour meetings a week. That's 96 hours a year, that based on a 4 weeks of being out of the office, right? That leaves 48 weeks to be in the office working. We got 2 10-minute breaks a day, adds up to 48 hours a year. A quarter hour a day of non-billable travel. And look at this unaccounted time. A really good, well-performing company is going to have each engineer is going to have about a half hour a day of unaccounted time. Meaning they came to work for 8 hours, they accounted for 7.5 hours, and that leaves half hour unaccounted for. I'll tell you, most of the companies that we start working with at C-level, that unaccounted time, because their utilization is iffy, is more like 2 to 3 hours. And that is just incredibly expensive for the company. But if we look at that total, that's 492 hours a year that we know our engineers are not going to be billing clients. That works out to 24% of their available time, right? There's 2,080 hours in a year, and 24% of that time they're not billing. That leaves the fact that they need to achieve their 3x billing multiple with 76% of their time that they come to work. Now here's a little gotcha. Remember I was talking about that 152 hours that we know they're going to be 0% billable that day? That means that they really only have 1,928 hours to be billable for their billable percentage. So if you account for the days that they're not at work, they need to be 82% billable on the days they are at work, right? So 75% average for the year means they need to bill 6 out of every 8 hours that they're at work, averaged for the year. But when you take out all those sick, vacation, and holidays, they actually need to be 82% billable on the days that they're at work, which is a little over 6.5 hours, in order to come out to your 75% average for the year. So that's a little gotcha to keep in mind. You're not looking for 6 out of every 8 hours. You're looking for 6.5 out of every 8 hours. So let's take a look at this chart. And in this chart, we're looking at the first 3 levers, right? Engineer pay, we're looking at your client billing rates, and we're looking at utilization. And if you look at that $60,000 a year engineer billing 75% of their time, in order to hit 3x or 3 times their pay, they would need to bill $115 an hour. Okay. And then if you look down at the bottom, I've got the $100,000 a year engineer billing 75% of their time, 76 on this graph. They need to bill $190 an hour. So a lot of times when we start looking at this chart with C-level clients, we find that they've got a problem with one of their first 3 levers: pay, billing rate, or utilization. And we got to get those straight before we can get anything else straight. And a lot of us put together bonus plans around, if you can achieve your utilization goals, then we'll pay you a bonus. And that works great in a time and materials model. The problem is that breaks down when we go to a flat fee model. Utilization is king in time and materials, but when we go to flat fee, utilization can actually damage margin in a very big way. And while utilization is king in time and materials, efficiency is king in the flat fee model. And that's when we figured out that the 4th lever has such a significant importance in gross margin and how we manage gross margin as service executives. So I got a couple new terms here that may be new to you. One is this term that I call the effective ratio, right? And this is, we take the billed service revenue divided by the shadow billable. So the billed service revenue is the amount that we billed the client for their flat fee, and the shadow billable is the amount we would have charged for the time and materials work that we did to support that flat fee agreement. And it could be a flat fee agreement or a flat fee project or even a flat fee ticket. As soon as you agree on a flat fee with the client, efficiency becomes king. So what I mean by that is, let's say the client paid us $1,000 flat fee for the month to take care of their network. And we put in 8 hours, and it's mostly one of our junior engineers at our $100 an hour rate, means we did $800 worth of shadow billable, right? So our effective ratio would be the $1,000 flat fee that we charged divided by the $800 worth of work that we did, would give us a ratio of 1.25, right? So this ratio is above a 1.0, meaning this happens to have been a profitable agreement for us that month. So if I look at the 4th lever, right, let me show you how that plays out in time entries. We've got 3 engineers doing time entries against this flat fee agreement this month. Bob did an hour's worth of work at our standard help desk rate of $100 an hour. So his shadow billable was $100. Fred did 2 hours at our after hours rate of $200 an hour, right? So he did $400 of shadow billable. And Tim, our senior engineer at our 150 rate, did 2 hours worth of work. So he's done $300 worth of work this month for that client. Total that up, we have our $800 of shadow billable. Again, the client paid us $1,000, so we take the 1,000 divided by 800. There's our ratio of 1.25. Now, the interesting thing about using this method is we can actually figure out what portion of that $1,000 each of these engineers is responsible for producing, right? They're converting their time into revenue. In this case, take our standard rates times 1.25. So that $100 time entry that Bob did this month was actually worth $125 of actual revenue for the company, right? So when we multiply the shadow billable out times that ratio, it's always going to equal out exactly to that $1,000 that the client paid us. But there's a caveat here. This effective ratio works both ways. So in this scenario, we didn't do $1,000 worth of work. We did $1,250 worth of work to earn that same $1,000, right? Bob, because of our inefficiencies and lack of using tools and technology and standardization, or lack of sticking to doing our proactive work, or lack of monitoring the system, right? And we end up with some big fire drill on our hands. We end up doing 5 hours worth of help desk work at $100 an hour, right? So he did $500 worth of work. Fred had more after hours work. The senior engineer didn't have to get involved as much, but we did $1,250 worth of work for that same $1,000 flat fee. In this case, there's a ratio of a 0.8, right? $1,000 divided by 1,250. Well, if we go back and multiply the value of each of our time entries times this month's ratio of a 0.8, you can see that $500 worth of work that Bob did was really only worth $400 of actual revenue for the company. And we're in effect working for 0.8 or 80% of our normal billing rates when we're supporting this agreement this month. And if you start looking at this, you're now allocating that revenue from these flat fee agreements proportionally to each engineer based on how they entered their time. And they've only got 173 hours a month to work with. And do you think that they can hit their 3x goal quicker at an efficient 1.25 ratio? Or do you think that each engineer can hit their 3x goal faster working at an inefficient 0.8 ratio on each of the agreements? And I advocate that we tie a bonus plan to this methodology of measuring the financial performance of our agreements, because now I know exactly that engineers are being bonused for doing high utilization when they're doing time and materials work, but doing high efficiency when they're doing flat fee work. And there's a great tool, mspcfo.com, takes the data straight out of your ConnectWise and calculates all of this and displays it for you in an amazing way. It's the only tool I know of that can actually give you a revenue per engineer that's all proportionally allocated based on who did the work on flat fee. So let's take a little bit deeper view of the impact of this flat fee effective ratio. So if we look kind of in the middle of the screen at that 1.0 effective ratio, right? That means our effective billing rate from our 150 an hour is 150, right? We're doing exactly $1,000 worth of work for the $1,000 flat fee. And an engineer has 173 hours a month to work with. But at 150 an hour, that $5,000 a month engineer with a $15,000 goal, at 150 an hour can hit their $15,000 goal by billing at 100 hours. That's only 58% of their 173 hours. But we know that they should be 75% billable, which is 132 hours. So if that engineer, 75% billable at the 150 an hour rate, they'd be billing almost $20,000 for the month. That's $19,850. So let's look at the effect of an inefficient agreement. And it's very common in the managed services world to have a 0.5 ratio, right? That means we're doing $2,000 worth of work for every $1,000 of flat fee that the clients are actually paying us. And that makes our effective billing rate 75 an hour. And an engineer would have to bill 200 hours, which is 115% of their time. And that's not reasonable. That's not going to happen. We know they're going to be billing 132 hours at half of our normal rates of 75 an hour, meaning that they can only bill about $10,000 a month, which would be 2x, right? 2 times their $5,000 pay. But the real magic happens when we're leveraging tools and technology and standardization, where we can get those agreement ratios to a 1.25. That means we're working for 125% of our normal billing rate. That would put our effective billing rate at $187.50 an hour. They're going to hit their 3x goal of $15,000 with only 80 hours of billing, which is 46% billable. But we know they can be 75% billable at 132 hours. So we take that 132 hours times 187.50. That same engineer, rather than billing 2x at 10,000 or 4x at 150 an hour at 20,000, that same engineer really should be billing close to 5x in this model at $25,000 a month. And this is very real and very achievable if you focus your time as a manager and executive on making sure we're leveraging tools and technology and standardization in the way we deliver that managed services revenue. So imagine the impact you're going to have on margin, right? So let's take another look at that effect of the fourth lever. So in this example, I've got our $150 an hour average T&M billing rate, but my effective ratio is at a 0.75, okay? A 0.75 means we're doing about $1,300 worth of work each month for that $1,000 flat fee, okay? And I got an engineer making $28.85 an hour, working their 173 hours. That's our $5,000 a month engineer. Their 3x billing goal is 15,000. But because we're working for 75% of our normal billing rates, our effective rate is about 112.50. That means at 112.50, it would take 133 hours to hit billable to hit our $15,000 billing goal. and that's right at 77% utilization. So if our fourth lever, our flat fee agreement effective ratio, is a 0.75, our engineers should be able to bill at right at exactly 3x, okay? But looking at this one, if we can get that flat fee agreement ratio just to a 1.0, remember 1.25 is what I'm really looking for, but if we can get it to a 1.0, that same engineer making $5,000 a month with a $15,000 3x billing goal is working for the 150 an hour. They only have to have 100 hours. They only have to be 58% billable to hit that 3x. And that leaves plenty of time, plenty of room to go out and go beyond their 3x and drive extra margin into the business. And by the way, I usually say we should have a bonus plan in place that engineers get some portion of their pay once they hit the minimum bar of 3x. And that's going to create an incentive for engineers to be highly utilized when they're doing time and materials billing, but understand that when they're doing flat fee billing, they can convert their time into revenue much more efficiently by leveraging tools, technology, and standardization. And efficiency is king on the flat fee. So just a quick recap on managing margin. There's really 4 levers that you have as a manager to move. There's engineer pay, and there's not a lot of movement in that lever. It's kind of set by your geography in most cases. There's a little bit of lever movement in your billing rates. Again, it's your geography, right? Rates are going to be much higher in New York and Los Angeles than they are in some of the rural communities. And but the third lever is utilization, and there's a lot of movement on utilization, especially around that unaccounted for time, where there's when I start working with companies, I generally find that there's about 2 hours a day of utilization that we can push that lever up to increase gross margin, and that's good margin to go get. But really, the real magic happens in that fourth lever. Right? Just looking at that one example on our efficiency, an engineer can go from billing $10,000 a month per engineer up to $25,000 a month per engineer just by working on leveraging your tools and technology and standardization. Okay, let's change gears a little bit here. One of the things that we can do to control margin in our managed services or managed security practice, especially in the managed security practice, because it's such a wild west still in the tool selection we have out there, is we've got a ton of tools that we need to be choosing what tool is going to work best for us, right? You've got firewall management, end user training, right? The know-befores out there. We got vulnerability assessments, penetration tests. You can kind of, looking at this list, you can just see the list goes on and on and on. These are new tools that we're adding into our offering. Now, when we're trying to add tools into our offering in the security practice, we're trying to align them and cover all of the aspects of the NIST cybersecurity framework, right? So we've got to identify what's going on from a security perspective in our clients. We need to protect their environment. We need to detect intrusions. We need to respond to those intrusions and recover. And we're going to go out and pick a bunch of tools like IT Boost or IT Glue for asset management. For risk assessment, we're going to be looking at rapid fire tools and ConnectWise Identify. In the Protect, we got access control. We're going to be looking at tools like Duo and standardizing on that. For awareness training, know-before. For the maintenance side, that's where we're using our RMM tools like ConnectWise Automate. In the protective technology, right? We want to make sure there's good desktop security, right? Something like WebRoot. Under detect and respond, ConnectWise has made investments in Perch security as well as Continuum Fortify to help us as a community do a better job there. And the recover side, we got Continuum Recovery and the Datto BDR tools. And these are some of the tools that we're using. And the message I want to try to get across is when we're looking at these tools, it's not just about the technology in the tool, right? It's not just about the best technology. It's about how do we leverage these tools to improve the gross margin that we're producing in our service delivery system. So there's actually a process to choosing tools. And most of us choose tools and then we end up failing, or they don't really make it into full integration in our company. And they're not making it because we tend to only focus on the technology of the tool rather than how to make it part of the way we do business. So here's a flow chart that C-Level uses when we coach our clients about tool selection. And if you look, the first couple of diamonds up there, they're all decision points. These first 4 decision points are typically happening in a trade show booth, right? You're here at IT Nation Connect, in this case virtual, and you're talking to a vendor who's representing and selling one of these tools, and they're going to make a lot of promises to you, and it's going to sound really good. But whoever's at the trade show is asking themselves a couple questions, right? Would this tool enhance our product offering? Yes or no, right? Is this going to improve the way we service our clients? Yes or no? Is this going to work with the tools that we already have in place? Is it going to work with the single point of glass, maybe our ConnectWise Manage interface, or our Bright Edge tool set, right? Is this going to work with what we have? And the person standing in the booth is likely telling you yes to all of these questions. But if they're telling you no, you're likely going to find yourself going to the abandon, like, nope, this tool is not going to work for us. But if that's all yeses, when we get to the come back to the office, right, we're going to grab our service team and we're going to say, hey, I found this new tool. It's so amazing. It's going to completely revolutionize the way we do business. So, and usually we just install it and start trying to use it, but there's a lot of steps missing, and that's why we're having so much trouble adopting tools. And what we should be doing is the engineers should be putting this tool in some sort of a lab environment. They're going to draft a documentation of how we're going to install this in our standardized environment. We're going to make sure, does this actually interface with our systems? Does it sync with ConnectWise like the way the guy standing in the booth said it would? You know, does it meet the hardware requirements? Does it require more hardware than is currently deployed in our solution stack? We work on creating the written standard for that installation. If there's any issues that we find during the implementation or test, we'll try to get those documented. And again, we need to assess, does this work as advertised? Not only does it work with their existing tool set, but does it work as advertised? And then the service department is going to put together a written recommendation. Yes, we should keep this tool. We like it, or no, we don't like it for these reasons, right? But then we get down to another round of executive decisions. Now we're saying, does this product actually work as advertised? Is it going to improve our product offering? Does it really truly integrate with ConnectWise the way we expect it to? And is it going to cause more administrative overhead for us, or is it going to actually save us time and money? And then here's the decision point that seems to never get asked. Can we take this tool and use it to produce the gross margin and net profit we're looking for? And if the answer is no to any of these, guess what? We need to abandon the product and look for something else. But if it's yes, then we're going to make this decision. Is this going to be a standalone service, or are we going, or does it save us enough hours that we don't need to put time into managing some aspect of what we're delivering to our client? Does it save us enough hours that it'll pay for itself in reducing our labor overhead, at which point we'll probably integrate it into our existing offering? That's a very, very key decision point that a lot of us are skipping. Then we'll decide that we're going to add this to our sales playbook, and we're going to release it to the sales team to go sell and add into our offering. So I would encourage you to evaluate your tool selection process. There might be some good ideas in here. Please use it to create your own and move forward. If you guys have been seeing any presentations by me, you've probably seen this slide, the EMyth. The EMyth is it was a game changer for me in my career, by Michael Gerber. It's the entrepreneurial myth. If we were doing this presentation live instead of me talking to this camera, I would go around the room and ask everybody, if you've read the EMyth, please raise your hands. And then I ask everybody with their hands up to keep them up for a second. And I ask the ones that have not read the book to look around at all the hands that are up. But more importantly, I say, if you've read the book and you think everybody that hasn't read the book, please leave your hand up. And it becomes a very powerful thing when no hands in the room go down. I've never seen a single hand in the room go down when I've done that. And to me, that's a pretty impactful statement that if you haven't read the E-Myth, please read it. It talks about the fact that the E-Myth is the entrepreneurial myth. Is the myth is that entrepreneurs start businesses, but that's the myth. The reality is that we're all technicians, managers, and entrepreneurs. And the entrepreneur part is this much, and the technician part is this much. And it's technicians that start businesses in the middle of an entrepreneurial seizure. And we start these businesses because we believe it's going to create freedom and more money for us as individuals, when in reality, most of us, after we start the businesses, find that we get exactly the opposite. And the E-Myth is how to turn that around and how to stop being the technician and let the people you hired be the technicians and start being the manager and the entrepreneur. And that's actually the highest and best use of your time. And the book is about what you should be doing with your time as a manager and an entrepreneur. So if you haven't read it, please do. Okay. One more aspect I want to get out there. So at C-Level, we've been doing this coaching thing for a while, 10 years. We've worked with over 450 companies, and we're making operational change in these companies. And what we find is that anytime you make operational change, you're inherently going to lower your employee satisfaction. Your employees do not like change. And we never want to make change for the sake of change. We want to make change for the sake of creating a better business environment to work in. And what we found is if you follow these 5 phases in this order every time, you'll get the benefits of the change without the drastic impact on employee satisfaction. And the 5 phases of any operational changes: number 1, understand the best practice. Learn from others. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Other people have already figured out how to do this. Number 2, take that best practice you've learned and document the way you plan to do business. It may be a little different than other people's best practice, and that's probably a good thing, but we need to get it documented the way you do business. Number 3 is train your team, right? So you understand the best practice, got it documented, now you train your team. The 4th phase is implement the new process. And then the 5th phase is inspect what you expect. Now we say the 5th phase is probably the most, well, it is the most important, but it's the least utilized phase. Most people just kind of go straight to phase 4 and cause all kinds of havoc in the company, and then just be constantly frustrated that nobody's following the process. And the reality is you can't hold them accountable in phase 5 unless you've documented, trained, implemented, and then inspect what you expect. And phase 5 is a seemingly endless cycle of measuring, are people following the process, and teaching and coaching until they are following the process. So let's talk about some of these operational processes that you need to focus on. We at C-Level, again, we've been doing this for a long time and worked with quite a few companies. So this stuff is very well vetted, but we've organized these over 100 different operational focuses into 10 different categories. So let's dive in and take a look at some of those. If you want to improve your gross margins, you need to go to work on these things. Number 1 is get your ConnectWise configured correctly, right? And 1A in the C-Level methodology is understanding your profit centers, right? And these are foundational things that need to be put in place, which is, what are your profit centers? And we try to get our clients to line up with the service leadership, business units, technical services, professional services, and managed services on the service side, maybe some shared infrastructure. And on the product resale side, hardware resale, software resale, and cloud resale, which is the Office 365s. We want you to work on your service boards and get those organized so that they feed the data you need so you can understand your profitability. We go to work on the workflow rules, right? This is the A in PSA, professional services automation. And when we're working on the workflow rules, we're actually manipulating the 3rd lever, right? The utilization lever. We want you to go to work on standardizing your agreement types. A lot of times we start working with companies and there's 10 or 15 different types of agreements configured in ConnectWise, and this is just confusing for everybody. Ultimately, it's going to lower your utilization. It's going to lower your overall agreement efficiencies. We want to work with you to get that standardized down to just somewhere between 2 and 4 agreement types. When we work on your billing rates, that's that 2nd lever, right? Lever 1, engineer pay. Lever 2, your client billing rates. Lever 3, utilization. Lever 4 is the flat fee effective ratio. We want to work on those recurring service tickets, right? We want to make sure we're doing all of our proactive work that we're contracted and promised our clients we would do. And we want to standardize that. And we want to create efficiency around getting that done, right? We're working on the third lever there. We want to go into the second section, which is get your policies and procedures documented around the life of the ticket, right? When we're working on triage, dispatch, time entry, we're working on the third lever, right? We're trying to get as much efficiency and utilization out of our engineers as we can, right? We're trying to move that third lever where there's a little bit more movement. When we're defining our after hours on call policy, that's affecting our first lever, right? Engineer pay. We want to go to work on measuring our KPIs, which is our fourth lever, right? That's the agreement efficiency. What's that efficiency ratio? When we're doing that, we're working on moving that fourth lever where there's a fair amount of movement. We want to go to work on measuring our ticket SLA numbers and our engineer utilization, right? We're working on our second and third levers specifically. As a manager, we're trying to move those levers to improve service gross margin. We go to work on the financial metrics with the service leadership index and the benchmarking. Again, that's all helping move those gross margin levers. The better we understand our metrics, the more we can make decisions that manipulate them in the way we want to. We got service team HR, we got engineer bonus plans and service manager bonus plans, right? We're working on that first lever, trying to move it and set it, trying to increase more billing, more pay for our team because they have higher billing. We're working on the employee job descriptions, right, in this fourth section. In the fifth section, we turn our attention toward leveraging our tools, right? In the security world, we've got security policy. We want to try to get that same policy instilled across our client base. That way our engineers know what the policy is. They know how to help enforce the policy. They know how to coach our clients on what the policy is. And if every client has a completely different written security policy, our engineers really don't know what standard to work toward, which is just going to create inefficiency and probably lower our lever 3 contribution to the margin, right? We want to get a SIM in place that's going to help us reduce our labor costs, and which will help us increase our agreement efficiency, right? The fourth lever. Same thing with the Security Operations Center. If we're on top of these incidents before they occur, then we're likely going to have to expend less labor, which is going to increase our security agreement efficiencies, right? And then, of course, we want to make sure we're working on all of our legacy tools that we use around RMM, password management, documentation. In the sixth area, we want you to go to work on getting your accounting systems in order, right? One of the biggest things we want to do in here, besides getting your chart of accounts lined up and understand how to do your billing and agreement true ups and make sure we're billing our clients for everything that they're actually consuming and what we're paying our vendors for. One of the most important things here is to go to work on the proposal integration. That way we're getting engineers involved in the scoping process, and then that's what, our engineering team is affecting our third lever of utilization. In the seventh section, we try to turn our focus more from an inward facing focus to let's put ourselves in our client's shoes and view how our company works with them as clients. And that's when we go to work on levers 1 and 3 with our pre-sales client assessments. We're working on the efficiency lever when we're working on client onboarding, right? We want to get that done as smoothly and as efficiently as possible so we can put the least amount of time in to getting this client onboarded, which is going to help with our agreement profitability. We're going to work on our project management processes. We're going to develop the role of the account manager, right, which is managing the relationship between sales and existing clients. And then we also, when we're working on lever 2, right, this is our engineer billing rates. We're making sure that our clients are understanding we're delivering value, not time. And that's going to help us increase the pricing, what we bill our clients, which is the second lever. In the 8th section, we're working on get ready to grow, right, which is the hiring process, employee onboarding, the annual training programs that we have with our team, spending time committing to working on the one-on-one meetings with our clients so that they understand our company. Each engineer understands what our company strategic goals are and what tactical goals each of them have that help align with the company achieving its strategic goals. We need to spend time doing this. For marketing, C-level is not going to come out and say we're the best marketing coach. And matter of fact, we avoid that. There's other marketing firms out there that you should be talking to, but there's some operational process that we want to get involved with, making sure that you're standardizing doing marketing in a predictable, repeatable way. Kind of same thing with sales. We don't hold ourselves up to be sales coaches, but there are some aspects of managing the sales department that are operational that we want to work with you and help you get that standardized in your company through the 5 phases. One of the most important ones we work on here is getting engineers involved in the scoping process, right? That has to help you, has to do with getting the pricing set appropriately so that the service department is set up for success. Getting those engineers involved early in the scoping process is incredibly important. So if you work on these 100 different operational focuses through these 10 different operational pillars, you'll find that if you're working on each of these things and getting your check marks that you worked on them, that margins are going to improve. And there's only one way it's going to happen. It's if you take action. And I love this quote from Thomas Edison: vision without execution is hallucination. If you're not actually taking the time to make your plan and execute, you're never going to achieve anything other than a hallucination. So the good news is I'll be back. I have 2 more sessions. One on Dan Saxby and I are doing on creating alignment between owners and service executives, and there's an Excel workbook involved. So this is when that is. Getting started with business budgeting. I'll be following one of Paul Dipple's sessions on the importance of managing to a budget. And I have a budget template Excel sheet that we're going to be talking about, how you can use it to create and manage your first budget. Here's a gift for you. I took some time at C-level and we put together this list of these different career decisions that typically the owners and the service executives make as they go through a journey of increasing the maturity and valuation. So you can click this QR code or just go to clevelops.com/key decisions and download this offer. It's a free offer. Don't forget, please fill out your session survey. It helps ConnectWise know that you're enjoying the content and we're talking about the right things and if I'm doing a good job or not. So once again, please fill out your survey. And here's the link for the live Q&A. I've been answering a couple of the questions on chat throughout this session, but we're going to have a live Q&A. If you want to jump onto my Zoom room, it's clevelops.zoom.us/my/rexfrank. And if you miss the key decisions offer, here's the link again for that. And I hope to see you in just a couple of minutes in the live session.